Jai Shri Gurudev. In this class, we will discuss the last part of Unit 1, that is Human Endocrine System. Here we will discuss morphology, hormones and their actions of pancreas and pineal gland. In addition to that, we will be discussing the neurohormones, that is the hormones of the hypothalamus. Pancreas is known as dual function organ because which is functioning both as exocrine gland and endocrine gland. This particular organ is leaf-like flattened structure which is found at the loop of stomach and the duodenum. Organ is divided into three regions: head, body and the tail. The head of the pancreas lies near the duodenum, whereas the tail extends to the hilum of the spleen, which is found at the other end. And the exocrine cells of the pancreas are the acinar cells, which involve in the secretion of digestive enzymes, whereas the endocrine cells of the pancreas secrete various hormones, peptide hormones, which involve mainly in the glucose homeostasis. Histological studies of pancreas shows two types of cells: exocrine cells and endocrine cells. In between the exocrine cells, that is in between the acinar cells of the pancreas, here and there group of cells are present. They are found as a island, and those cells are the endocrine cells. And these, since they are scattered in between the pancreatic acinar cells, just like the islands, and which was first described by Langerhans, the, these group of cells are named as islets of Langerhans. There were about 2 million islands of Langerhans found in pancreas, of which majorly 65% of the beta cells and 25% of alpha cells are present, and in addition to that delta cells comprises about 5 to 10%, and pp cells, that is pancreatic polypeptide cells, are present, in which the alpha cells are involved in the secretion of peptide hormone called glucagon. Beta cells are the insulin secreting cells, and delta cells secrete somatostatin. PP cells secrete pancreatic polypeptide. In the very first class of this chapter, we were discussing role of hormones in homeostasis. In that, we have discussed the role of insulin and glucagon in glucose homeostasis. The same will be discussed here also. That is, the normal blood glucose level is 90 mg per 100 ml. Soon after the intake of a food, this level increases. There will be high blood glucose concentration. In that case, the beta cells of the islets Langerhans of pancreas get stimulated, and which in turn release insulin hormone into the blood, and thus influence or induce the body cells, somatic cells, to uptake more and more glucose, and in that way blood glucose level declines, and majorly which acts on the liver cells, hepatic cells of the liver, to take up glucose, and which is converted into polysaccharide form, that is animal glucose glycogen. This will serve as a reserve food material, reserve food of carbohydrate. In that way, the excess of the blood glucose will be reduced by the activity of insulin hormone, which is one of the hormones of pancreas, which is secreted by the beta cells of islets of Langerhans, and thereby which involve in the reduction of the blood glucose level to the normal. Suppose when the person undergoes starvation, that is without food, the reserve food has to be utilized for the energy purpose. In that case, the declined or the decreased blood glucose level than the normal blood glucose level, which influence over the alpha cells of pancreas, and which in turn get stimulated and release glucagon hormone into the bloodstream. Thus, glucagon hormone acts on the stored form of glucose, that is glycogen, which is present in the liver, and breakdown of the glycogen will take place, and which in turn release the glucose into the bloodstream, and thus inflow of glucose from the liver into the bloodstream increases the blood glucose concentration to the normal level. And in that way, these two hormones, that is insulin and glucagon hormone, majorly involved in the regulation of the blood glucose level. The delta cells of the islets of Langerhans of pancreas secrete somatostatin. This is also known as growth hormone inhibiting hormone, GHIH, growth hormone inhibiting hormone. It acts locally on the islets of Langerhans and inhibit the secretion of both insulin and glucagon hormone. Suppose if there is fluctuation in the insulin and glucagon hormone, in that case, thus a somatostatin gets secreted by the delta cells of the pancreas, and which act on alpha and beta cells, that is the neighboring cells of the islets of Langerhans, and inhibit or decrease the secretion of insulin and glucagon hormone, and which also reduces the gastric secretions and inhibit the release of gastrointestinal hormones as well. In addition to the alpha cell, beta cell, and delta cell, there are few number of cells present. Those are PP cells, pancreatic polypeptide cells, which secrete pancreatic polypeptide, nothing but a protein form. And this is get produced by the PP cells in the presence of protein, and which become the strong stimulus for the production of this pancreatic polypeptide, and which also affect the gastric and biliary secretion, and which regulate the motility of the gastrointestinal tract, the movement of the bolus in the gastrointestinal tract, which is controlled or regulated by the pancreatic polypeptide. Pineal gland is a tiny gland, very small gland, which looks like pine cone, hence the name pineal gland. which is located in the geometric center of the brain, just behind the eyes, below the corpus callosum, and posterior to the third ventricle of brain. The color of the pineal gland is reddish gray, and whose length is approximately 10 millimeter. This particular gland is surrounded by a fine capsule and is composed of epithelial cells which are arranged to form lobules, and that lobules are surrounded by fine connective tissues. The histological study of a pineal gland shows two types of cells in it. One is pinealocytes and another one is glial cells. Pinealocytes are like neurons. They are star shaped and they are arranged in cluster. They have numerous microtubules, extensive smooth surfaced endoplasmic reticulum, and a few small granules. And these cells are sensitive to light, and they are innervated by the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, through which they receive signals from the retina of the eyes. Thus, the nerve endings are also seen in the pineal. The glial cells are elongated and run between the nests of the pinealocytes. Often their nuclei are more dense and ovoid. With the age, the pineal get accumulated with large calcium rich particles, and these calcium rich particles are called brain sand. Pineal gland secretes hormone called melatonin. Pineal gland is sensitive to light. Through the retina, the message is carried by the sympathetic and parasympathetic nerves to the pineal gland, and inside which the nerve endings are innervated. And accordingly, with the exposure to the light, which decreases the secretion of melatonin. In the absence of light, if there is no light, the sense gives the pineal gland to secrete more quantity of melatonin. That is, the melatonin production is increasing during the night time, late in the evening, and which will be in peak in the middle of the night, and which will go to the normal or decreased level of secretion with the onset of the sun, that is with the light in the early morning. Its secretion will be declined. Melatonin play a major role in reproduction, which acts as anti-gonadotrophic factor, that is, which inhibits the secretion of gonadotrophic releasing hormone as well as the secretion of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary, and thus which prevent the onset of puberty before the appropriate age. And in the circadian rhythm, that is a sleep wake cycle, which is shown by slowing the electroencephalograph rhythm. With the increased melatonin in response to the darkness, which halt the metabolic activities happening in our system, which halt or stop the various metabolic activities. Thus, the heat production is reduced or minimized. Body temperature is declined, and which induce the sleep in the animal. The other effects of melatonin are which is responsible for the distribution of skin pigments in amphibians, and also which control the circadian rhythm of the migrating birds. The neurons secrete hormones called neurohormones. And these are the chemical messengers secreted by the neurons. These chemicals enter into the bloodstream and which will travel to the distance and target the particular organ or the cells in the body. There are two category of neurohormones that is given out by the hypothalamus. The first category is releasing hormone or releasing factor. Another one is inhibitory hormone. The inhibitory hormones are the hormones which inhibit the secretion of other type of hormones from the glands. The releasing hormone controlling the secretion of anterior pituitary, hence they are called releasing factors. And two hormones which are secreted by the hypothalamus are ADH, antidiuretic hormone or vasopressin, and oxytocin. We have discussed the activity or effects of ADH and oxytocin in the previous class. That is, ADH target the kidney tubules and which involve in the reabsorption of water, and which that means which involve in the water balance. Oxytocin target the mammary glands and the uterine muscle during the parturition, which induce the contraction of the uterine muscle, and during the suckling of the baby in the mammary gland, which is responsible for the ejection of the milk. Hypothalamus gives out two category of hormones by the nerve endings of the neurons. Those are releasing factors and inhibiting factors. The releasing factors of hypothalamus are called hypothalamic releasing factors. That means these factors are the hormones target the pituitary gland to secrete certain hormones. Therefore, they are called releasing factors. And some of the hormones given out by the hypothalamus are inhibiting the secretion of the pituitary, and therefore they are called inhibitory hormones. The hypothalamic releasing factors are thyrotrophin releasing hormone, that is TRH, corticotrophic releasing hormone CRH, gonadotrophin releasing hormone, that is GnRH, growth hormone releasing hormone. These are the category of hormones given by the hypothalamus which act on the pituitary gland. In response to that, the pituitary gland, that is anterior pituitary gland, release some hormones. That is, thyrotrophin releasing hormone target the anterior pituitary lobe, which in turn secretes thyroid stimulating hormone and prolactin hormone. Thus, thyroid stimulating hormone target the thyroid gland and which involve in the metabolic pathways. Similar way, the prolactin hormone target the mammary gland during the pregnancy and which involve in the mammary gland development and after the birth which is responsible for the milk secretion. Whereas the prolactin releasing inhibiting hormone inhibit the secretion of prolactin from the anterior pituitary, that is during the non-pregnancy period of a woman. Thus prolactin releasing inhibiting hormone is released from the hypothalamus and which target the anterior pituitary, thereby which stop the secretion of prolactin. Therefore, in the absence of prolactin, there will be no gland development and milk secretion in the non pregnant women. The corticotrophin releasing hormone target the anterior pituitary and release adrenocorticotropic hormone, that is ACTH. This adrenocorticotropic hormone target the adrenal gland of the cortex and medulla of the adrenal gland and which involve in the secretion of mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, and various other steroid hormones, thereby which involve in the metabolism. Gonadotropin releasing hormone of the hypothalamus target the anterior pituitary and which is responsible for the synthesis and secretion of follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone from the anterior pituitary. Thus, FSH and LH targets ovaries in female and testes in male, and therefore which show the effects like gamete development and the hormone secretion. That the development of the follicles by the activity of follicle stimulating hormone and the activity of luteinizing hormone increase the hormone secretion both in case of male and female. The growth hormone releasing hormone secreted by the hypothalamus target the pituitary gland and which in turn gives out growth hormones. And these growth hormones target the tissues and the liver and which involve in various metabolic activity in order to obtain the energy molecules or the storage of the energy molecules and thereby which is responsible for the entire growth and the development of the individual. But thus growth hormone level gets seized up with the age by the release of another hormone, that is inhibitory hormone, by the hypothalamus, that is growth hormone inhibiting hormone. Thus growth hormone inhibitory hormone inhibit the secretion of or decrease the secretion of growth hormone from the anterior pituitary, therefore which slow down the growth and the development at one particular age of the individual. And these are the hypothalamic releasing factors and the inhibitory factors and their actions. Thank you.